it's the contract, it's the fans, it's the stadium which you play in, but also the stuff that people, unless your players, don't see, is the data side of it. So the amount of times we wear GPS trackers, gum shields have got concussion stuff in it, and now there's going to be ball technology. Like, there's so much that we can use as players.
15-year-old Meg's like going to training with my dad's shorts on in the freezing cold, not even knowing like international rugby was a thing for women back then.
If somebody walked past you in the street and you could see clearly they had no clue about rugby and they told you, and you'd laugh.
2022 was a huge year for women's rugby, of course, and with the Women's TikTok Six Nations around the corner, I think it might be a nice time to talk about the growth of the women's game and where it's got to. So, Shauna, I'm going to come to you first, recently retired.
Yeah.
Shauna,
yeah.
Congratulations, is that the right word? Or?
Yeah, definitely, congratulations. People are like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I'm not. I'm looking forward to it. But I also struggle now with what I call myself. At the moment, I'm just a retired rugby player. It's a bit sad, isn't it, really? So I'm trying to make up my own job title at the moment.
Well, you're in good company. all fellow retirees. Obviously, it's still recent, and maybe you've not had a chance to process it all, but in terms of, through your career, the growth of the women's game, from where it started to where it got to as you finished, what were some of the biggest changes you saw?
So even in my short time in rugby, I've only been playing rugby in general for 7 years, and 5 of those in international, but yeah, there's been 2 major changes, one of which was professional contracts. So it's not that long ago that I was working in the fire service as a full-time firefighter, working 9 till 6, getting straight on the M25, hoping to be at training for 7:30 to finish at 9, get home for 10:30 and do the same again sort of the next day. And now I look back, I'm like, wow, how did I do it? So it does feel like a world away from where we got to today. And luckily, the other home nations have now come on board and starting to introduce the contracts for women as full-time. And even that, like, contracts is one thing, but then it's what the contracts look like, etc. So there's still so much room for growth. But yeah, that's a big major change for me to go from amateur, but still elite player, to be a professional rugby player. Yeah, it was pretty special.
Yeah. Can you remember at the time you got the contract through, emotionally, what you felt like? Was it like, I'm actually getting paid to do this for a job now. I don't have to work 2 jobs and, like you say, go from one to the other and then back again.
There was a part of me, a very adult part of my brain that doesn't always get engaged, that I actually still wanted to work, because getting into the fire service, anyone who's applied for the fire service will know it is pretty special to even get in. So I didn't want to give that up. So when I found out, so you find out by phone first, it's not just sort of, here's a surprise contract, congratulations. So you do find out a little bit in advance. So I try to put things in place to still be employed by the fire service, because I did want to have sort of those 2 things going on. It's like, imagine having the luxury of not wanting to accept a contract straight away as a professional woman, and growing up as a girl in sport, and it's all I've ever done is sport. It was, wow. Like, I would have given my right arm at any point in my life to be a professional woman. So there was not a chance I was going to not take it, but it was still important to, like I say, just have that other side of my brain that kicks in, that just, it's like the what if, the fallback, the bounce back from it. But yeah, it was special to not only hear and see my name on the list of the contracts. I think we was added to a WhatsApp group at first, and it wasn't really named, but there was only 30 people in it, and there's 30 contracts. And like, I wonder what this group is about. But yeah, when that piece of paper actually comes through and you sign it and you send it back and they acknowledge it, and like, wow, like this is a moment in history.
Yeah, special moment. Meg, I caught you at the corner of my eye, nodding in approval. I guess a lot of that will resonate with you in terms of what you saw in your career from start to when you finished. Obviously, unfortunately cut short by injury, but I guess in those couple of years, you would have seen a huge growth and huge changes in the women's game as well.
Definitely. I wasn't lucky enough to make it quite that far to professional status, but like, I'm smiling just hearing you talk about it, because like, I can imagine how cool that must have been. But no, even the prospect of it is such a huge change, because I remember like 15-year-old Meg's like going to training with my dad's shorts on in the freezing cold, not even knowing like international rugby was a thing for women back then, because it just wasn't known to people. So to have come that far in such a short space of time is huge. And then yeah, just as I was finishing up like March 2021, even since then, and that's not even 2 years ago, there's been such a like huge amount of change. And following the World Cup, Scotland got professional contracts, which is cool. So like, all my friends and teammates can now say rugby's their job, which is which is amazing. And yeah, I think playing rugby for me wasn't about money. It's never really been about money or anything like that, because if it was, I wouldn't have done it, because there just wasn't the funds there. But to see that young girls now have the aim of being a professional full-time rugby player is huge, because I think I would imagine everybody, not just Scotland Women, it was always to inspire and to show that rugby is an option, not just for the boys in your class at school, but you can do it too. So for them to now know that they could do that as a job is huge. So yeah, that growth is really cool.
Ben, I guess along with England, France were probably one of the pace setters in terms of women's rugby. And
I didn't want to interrupt her. I was going to.
No, you're listening intently. I like it. That's why I call you. I was like, Ben wants to jump in. But I guess, like I say, France and England maybe a bit ahead in terms of what they were doing. But I mean, they're really investing. They've got behind the women, and you can see that in their performances. Of course, consistently one of the top 3 teams in the world. What do you make of the growth so far, and what do you see coming around the corner?
Exciting, refreshing, super positive. I think what's super lovely about what you guys are saying is how complementary the mindsets are. Now you're saying, no, let's keep a right balance. Of course you wanted to play to the best of your ability, but you were always thinking about, how can I just thrive as a human being first and enjoy my rugby for what it is. That's a positive message, to give out. And that's why people are falling in love with women's rugby, because it is different in terms of mindset and even what you can create. And that's the balance between the two is great. And I think if people fall in love with rugby, it's for the values, yes, physicality, probably, the social side of rugby, but definitely for the inclusion bit. And so that's why sevens and women's rugby have a huge role to play, to benefit the game as a whole.
For me, playing in France is always special, because you get the crowd buy-in, you get the local buy-in, and I don't know completely how the system works, but France is the only place I'd say that I've gone to, you go on the team coach, of course, and the streets are lined with cars and people, and on that journey in, and say like that last mile, it's just people and cars and more people and buggies and wheelchairs, and just, they're here to watch us. Like I've never experienced that anywhere else, and it's like, wow, like we're actually pretty decent at rugby, because sometimes we do forget that bit. But yeah, it's special to go to France and realise that the hometown and the local town buys into it, and they very much take ownership, and they want to be there. It's not because they've given away loads of free tickets or there's a men's game afterwards or a men's game before. Like, they generally want to come see us. So yeah, I like to play France in France.
I guess moving on very, very slightly, the one thing that goes hand in hand with the growth piece is technology. So I guess, Mara, I'll start with you in terms of how you've seen technology influence and I guess aid the growth of the women's game, and I guess, has it been a good thing?
I think that technology is a really good thing. A big part is done about people, just to able to read effectively the date that the technologies gives. I can remember when I was in white and black rugby, and
it wasn't that long ago.
No, it was coming the new technologies, and someone said us, you make a lot of tackle. It depends, but you won in 50 points, and you have 80% of possession ball. Obviously, you not make tackle. So the technologies is really interesting to developing the sports. In the same time, we need to develop all of the mindset and change all that to be able to read effectively the dates and the possibility to develop the rugby in this moment.
For me, the obvious technology point came in when probably us 4 were playing. You 2 would have only known it, but would be like managing social media. So like including yourself, Tops, we would have played and social media came in during our careers. I think what players don't get educated on is when you do manage that social media account, is suddenly you go on there after playing on free-to-air TV, which is great for the girls now, but somebody telling you that you're bad and actually coping with that, because that's one thing that I think young people don't expect to encounter is, and the thing they need to expect is you can please some of the people, but you'll never please everyone. And the earlier you know that, the better.
Certainly bits around social media, and particularly with the World Cup, we were almost taken to a new audience, a worldwide audience.
Did you girls talk about that? Like because you know it's like you go in the changing room and people naturally get their phones out.
Yeah.
When it doesn't go to plan, Was there girls talking about? 'Cause that's
So
probably quite
luckily for
unusual.
us, it generally did go to plan until that last
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
So it's not so bad. We spoke about it more just sort of on a one-to-one basis, and there's particular positions on the field, like the decision makers, who would almost get it worse than others because, especially as a prop, I feel like I can probably make quite a few mistakes and people won't notice. But it's then the agreement you make as a team. So we did talk about like what are our social media protocols? So at what point do we stop posting before a game? Do we post, if anything, at all on game day? And then what point after a game? Because I know I spoke to one of the Lioness footballers, and the main thing that stuck out for me is they don't look on social media up to 24 hours after their game, and not because they don't want their players to promote themselves, put themselves out there. It's because of the comments, and it's because you don't want them to see. And as much as it's very easy for someone outside the bubble to say, "Oh, well, just don't look." Like the amount of times I've heard people say,
much easier said
"Oh,
than done."
just don't look," and you're like, I can't. It's literally right there on my phone.
But you don't want to turn away the 99 nice messages.
No.
Because you might, for the one bad one you get,
Yeah.
but frustratingly, that's the one we all
And
remember.
it is literally, it is that kind of ratio.
Yeah,
it is.
it is.
But as players, as elite athletes, we do want opinions because we want to be better. We want to know what someone thinks of us, so then we can be better. But it is about remembering that, like you say, for every one negative comment, there's 99 others, and there's probably 1,000 others who haven't said anything that think you're amazing and think you had a brilliant game. So that is a tough element for us as women, like say, going through.
The best advice I give someone if they're going through like social media or negative comments would be that person, if it was Rory getting stuck into me, I'd be like, it's from a credible source, but obviously none of us do that to each other, so you know what it's like. But the person who's saying that they might say completely ill-advised an insecurity you may have. And if they say that on social media, the problem is you can't personify that tweet. So it gets you. But if somebody walked past you in the street and you could see clearly they had no clue about rugby and they told you, and you'd laugh. So I think you just need to try and personify who that person actually is, and suddenly it'd be water off a duck's back, and it's fine. It doesn't matter. It's not come from a credible source at all.
It's a funny one, Sam, that when you think about it logically, if 99 people told you one thing and one person told you the other, probably in any other facet of life, you would listen to the 99. Yet on social media, you tend to listen to the one. And it's sort of part of the question is how do you switch that mindset to go, well, actually, look, that's all positive. 1% is negative. Because I remember the first time I captained Ireland, 2012. And, I don't know how many messages on social media, all brilliant, but I couldn't tell you what any of them said. But I'll tell you what the one negative one was, and it was it involved my weight, which is never pleasant anyway, especially when you're a front row. But it's still, and to this day, so what's that, 11 years ago, I still remember exactly what he said. Remember his name and where he lives as well, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, Meg, with the technology side of things as well, can you remember a point in your career where you thought, I'm on it, I'm just playing so well at the minute? The technology helps, but actually you personally, you can't put a finger or reason on it. Everything's just happening as you want it to happen.
I think probably I'd say early on in my international career, we had a test match against Canada, and for whatever reason, I just felt like on top of the world. But that was, we're talking like 2018, and then from then, like injuries crept in, and then it was a bit of a long slog towards the end. But I think there was such a focus then on, for me personally, was like how I looked as a person, and it was less about like being a skillful rugby player. And I think I didn't see that shift until probably later in my career, where set piece was actually starting to happen and it was working for me. Technology was huge in getting me back on the pitch time and time again. I think I missed more games than I actually played, but even things like a piece of equipment that can measure the speed the bar moves in the gym was huge for me, because it meant I could balance out my left and right leg, and it reduced the chances of my ACL going for the third time or the fourth time.
The moment I just make consistent the perception that I was in a high level was after a few years, after I arrived in France, in Stade Français, when Ben Kaiser was really young, and I saw the difference between the club, Italian club, French club, and international side. So at that moment, I said, okay, I have an objective to arrive to the higher level I can, as high as possible. And I watching that I'm playing in a moment, in a wonderful moment, and I have a lot of chance to improve and have fun with the rugby.
Yeah, I think for me it was is probably different to the guys as I was a bit older. I remember when I got married and then we decided to have our first kid. I remember strength conditioning coach saying to me, do not have a kid while you're still playing. It is going to ruin your career. But actually it was the opposite. Like that's when I played easily my best rugby, because it went from being sort of everything was about rugby and nothing else was important to kind of having a different focus. You know, it gives you a focus to train hard, to prepare well, to do everything you could. It just gives you a different focus and give you sort of this different kind of, I need to make somebody else proud, and actually what I do matters to somebody else. And that really spurred me on. Now I had a very, very understanding wife that knew leading into the games that I needed sleep, and I was still able to balance that with being a father and having that real motivation to, I suppose, make somebody proud.
I love both mindsets, because that's what a rugby team needs, right? You need a bit of everything. Don't get me wrong, when you play 6 or 7 or even potentially 9, you need to have some sort of engine about you to go and do your job and to be the best in the world, challenged by the best. For us, it was just slightly different. We need to be a bit more in control. So I totally agree with Rory. When I was my physical peak, it's not where I placed my best rugby. It was more with experience and maturity and understanding the small little margins, how I could impact them, especially with the role of hooker, so scrummaging, line-outs, but also defense organization, all that stuff. And so just to relate it back to technology, there's definitely an element of helping yourself perform better in terms of training equipments and, you know, tracking your performance, absolutely. There's an element of getting this bloody complicated game to understand, rugby, understandable by all. So you need, fan experience, but also you need to generalize things with figures, with numbers, with colors, so that at least we know, and that's where technology can be brilliant. But also for me, it was tracking performance over time. It really allowed me to understand that when you're helping a team to perform better, it's not just leadership skills, it's also measurable by just guys getting off the floor a little bit faster. It's seconds that you need to set up a scrum. It's, going into the marginal details of clocking the timings of the callings in the scrum, pending on different refs are there. So it's just those I use technology to help me bring my performance to a sustainable moment. To make it in the long run, it was by a mile the most defining thing that I could have had towards the end of my career. So it's not so much on my physical side, really on the strategic, little margins everywhere, understanding globality backed by measures.
Last question, I'll probably go Megan first and then Sean if you wrap up for me. TikTok Women's Six Nations is around the corner. We've spoken about the growth to this stage. So with where the women's game is right now, where would you love to see it at the end of this tournament?
Growing an audience is huge. I think off the back of the World Cup, we're going to have a lot more people tuning in to watch. Getting people to games is huge. You know what it's like playing in front of a huge crowd. It's an incredible feeling, and I think women need to get accustomed to that and get comfortable knowing that people actually want to watch and people want to support and be there, because women's rugby is, different from men's rugby, but it's just as exciting and just as great to watch and be a part of. So just the game growing as a whole, and I think the World Cup was a great platform for that.
For me, it's whole package stuff. So it's the fan, it's the contract, it's the fans, it's the stadium which we play in, but also the stuff that people, unless your players don't see, is the data side of it. So the amount of times we wear GPS trackers, gum shields have got concussion stuff in it, and now there's going to be ball technology. Like, there's so much that we can use as players, or maybe not now because we don't play, but the players can use to perfect their game. And as long as we sort of take on that data, but there's only certain things we need to know, especially as a front row, we're simple-minded. We only need to know what we need to know. But if somebody could tell me how hard I've hit in that scrum, and actually if I hit a little bit harder or maybe a little bit less or whatever it is. So it is the data side of the game as well within the women. That's growing too. And sadly, sometimes it means you can't get away with as much. And the amount of times you've had a home session and you're like, if I can just maybe run it a little bit slower or do it maybe just a little bit, but you can't get away with it because it's all there. It's all there for them to see. As much as the public stuff, the stuff that's on show, sometimes how we look as in literally our kit and our uniform and the stadiums we're playing in and the TV stuff, but it's also, like I say, the data that people don't see improving the game. But I can assure you, when we're in camp, that's the stuff we're looking at. Like, that's the stats we want to improve. So whilst it just looks like good rugby on the pitch, on the TV, it's because we know we've got to run faster, we've got to accelerate harder, we've got to decelerate harder, or whatever it is. There's still so many growth areas that aren't so public that will help continue the win as well.